Gridiron Grinder! Hut hut hike!
All right, it's Wednesday night, Gridiron Grinder time. I'm Ryan. With me, as always, is my buddy James. Just a couple of dudes hanging out talking about what's going on in the NFL each week. This is episode 103, creeping up there. So for tonight, we're going to kick things off with Name That Stadium like we always do. After that, we're going to hit the news from this past week, which is a little bit shortened since we just did our past show on Friday. And then after that, we're going to spend some time evaluating the infamous Andy Dalton Scale. There was a interesting article on NFL.com recently talking about it, and we want to give our 2 cents. And then last but not least, we'll close things off with question of the week. And so, with all that being said, how's it going tonight, James?
It's going good. How's it going with you?
It's going good, man. It's going good. You know, we got our show tonight, short week, and then we're off next week. It's like, holy cow, we finally have one hit triple digits, and what's going on here? We think we're like celebrities. We can just call things off whenever we want.
It's summertime. Got to take the kids on vacations.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I don't know. 3 and 2 years, I think we're doing pretty good.
True.
Okay, well, let's kick it over to Name That Stadium. And so, for anybody who's watching, this is a part of the show where, as you can see, James is out there traveling the country. Every week, he's got a different stadium in his background. And we're just asking if you think you know what stadium that is, hit us up in our comments section. First person to get the right answer gets a special shout out next week's show. James, where were we at last week, man?
Last week I was in Houston. I I chose Houston because we were talking about head first year head coaches, and I thought basically was thinking Lovie Smith was like the worst of all of them, and instead of taking the best, I took the worst last week and went with Houston.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Hey, it was a fun show talking about the new coaches. We got 10 of them out there this year. I mean, geez, when you think about it, 10 of them, it's like a third of the league almost. It's a lot of turnover. And then we covered it: six offensive minded, four defensive minded, five retreads, five fresh meat. It's a pretty good mix, I would say, for new guys in the league, or newly appointed head coaches is the proper
Yeah.
way to put it. So, okay, cool. Well, good stuff. Let's move it on here and let's do a recap of the past week. And so, James, looking at the news from this past week, keeping in mind we're just going back to this past Friday, it seemed like mostly puff pieces to me. And so there's not going to be a ton that I dig into. But the big one that came out earlier today is that Baker Mayfield has been traded to the Carolina Panthers for a conditional 2024 fifth round pick. And so I think they were saying that can bump up to a fourth rounder if I saw that right. Um,
Yeah, it was a fourth rounder, and it was dependent on playing time, I
okay.
believe.
And that's a pretty. Oh, and in addition to that, I believe he took a 3.5 million pay cut for this upcoming season. And so, all that being said, I think that was a pretty good deal for Carolina, to be honest. They know Darnold's not likely the answer, and so now they got Baker, who I think everybody is assuming comes in as the QB1. If things fail, you got Darnold there at least to have maybe a little bit of fire under him. Who knows? Um, but they didn't have to sell the farm to get Baker. I would have preferred them being patient and getting Jimmy G, but hey, it is what it is. They made a move.
Yeah, which kind of like I was hearing a lot of Jimmy G stuff, and then I think it kind of tells me that maybe Jimmy G's not, and I told you this, maybe Jimmy G's not as far along in his recovery as um, he should be.
Yeah, that could be something. And hang on to that because we're going to talk about that in our question of the week. But yeah, that could be a concern. All right, in other news, James, I saw former Bears defensive lineman Eddie Goldman has signed a 1 year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. I think that was a good move. He's been solid on the interior defensive line there in Chicago. Him, Grady Jarrett, that could be good for the Falcons. They need help. They'll take all the help they can get. 1 year deal, so it's nothing crazy, but um, you know, solid piece to report, I would say. Uh,
Yes,
yeah,
not bad.
yeah, it's nothing spectacular, but he'll be a contributor. And then you were just telling me something about Demarius Thomas, man. What's going on there?
Yeah, apparently in his autopsy report, he he had CTE. Like I just come across it, and now I've lost it. Um, but he had CTE. Where the fuck did it go? This is annoying me. I just had it. Ah, there it is. It's like I just had it open. Somehow this stupid fucking browser tab closed. Um, so bear with me.
Sure.
He had CTE, and they believe that that's what caused his seizures.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, because that's what he had a. They think he had a seizure and fell and hit his head or something was the cause of
Yeah,
death.
he was having seizure issues um, since he left the NFL, and then so I think from what I'm glancing through the article again, I think they're saying that possibly CTE was a contributing factor to his seizure.
Okay.
Um, he was struggling with memory loss, paranoia, and erratic behavior
Oh man,
last
that's
year.
all horrible stuff. I didn't know any of that until after we found out he had passed, and I remembered hearing a little bit about some issues, but I had no idea it was to like any kind of extent like that. That's not good.
Yeah, and apparently the last year before his death, it was increasing, and
Okay.
it was getting worse. But they say CTE isn't known to cause seizures, but they think that it could have been a contributing factor because he would just isolate himself because of his paranoia and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe it needs further research, and yeah, I'm sure the league and all these medical experts are still trying to figure it out, and
The
you
league
know,
doesn't give two fucks. They just want to bury anything that has to do with concussions and not talk about it. Come on
well,
now.
I mean, I think they gotta try to keep these guys safe if they want to protect the future of the league. And
They got to pretend to keep the guy safe.
okay, all right. And I will say this, the Junior Seau thing was pretty traumatic, but that was, sending a pretty big message of, hey, you got to check this stuff out because it's messing with
Yeah.
people. And so, it's a bummer to hear that, but hopefully, the league or whoever does better for these players and takes care of them because I love me some football and I want to keep watching it, James. All right. Anything else news wise that you saw since this past Friday?
Not really. There was one other thing, like it was a random thing. Apparently, RFK caught on fire,
Okay.
or there were fires. It's like they can't dem- they're not basically for some reason they can't demolish RFK, and it keeps catching on fire, and it's just like the fuck.
Yeah, that's not a good situation.
Glancing at it, not really.
Okay. Well, we don't need to beat the dead horse. It was a
Oh,
short week.
Hank, hate to hate to end on this note, but basically Hank Goldberg, who was like the uh, handicapping expert for ESPN, died this week.
Oh, I'm glad you caught that. I did hear that. Yeah. Yeah, he was a pretty well known guy, man.
Yeah,
Which, hey, we might switch it up this year when we get to the regular season. I was
uh,
talking to you about a proposed change where we bring in a betting angle.
yeah, he was 500 or better in 15 of 17 NFL seasons while predicting games for ESPN,
Okay.
which is pretty good. Like, I mean, that's pretty damn consistent.
Yeah. Nice and steady.
He was 82, so it's probably, he had chronic kidney disease and old age ailments, so that's what they're saying he basically died from.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah, and we don't have to finish it on that note because we were actually talking earlier about the Seahawks making
Mm.
some announcement about the team is not for sale right now.
It's not for sale right now, but it will be in the future.
Okay.
It was the Seahawks and the Portland Trailblazers are owned by the same person.
Gotcha.
Yeah, whatever. You know what? You're just
Rich
saying
people
that.
issues.
Rich people issues. You're gonna sell it for like $6 billion,
Yeah. So
and
we got to
then
make 6 billion, is what you're telling me, James.
yeah, pretty much.
I'd love to buy a team with you. I'll come up with three. You come up with three. Come on.
Or find somebody to give us a loan for it. But then we have to pass the whole get admitted to the league. So we got to get the money first.
I think we can get in. We're just going to show them our episode of Gridiron Grinder that went over 100 views, and they're going to be like, "Oh, get these guys in here. They're amazing."
Or keep these guys the fuck out of here.
They make us sign something. No more Gridiron Grinder.
Yeah, this asshole keeps ripping the league and the concussion
Yeah.
policy. What the fuck?
Okay. We'll stop doing the show. Give us the team. Easy. All right. We're really stretching it now. So
Yeah.
let's move it on here. Let's get to the main part of the show. So tonight, like we were saying, we are going to evaluate the Andy Dalton Scale. And this was prompted by an article that came out on June 22nd on NFL.com by Dan Hanzus. The Andy Dalton Scale, top candidates to be the prime meridian of QB1s in the 2022 NFL season. And so we both saw this, James. I disagreed with some of Hanzus' assessment and thought it'd be good for us to give our 2 cents. It's not that I think he's like wildly off, but I just, I want to give Dalton a little bit more credit than maybe he got throughout his career. I want to maybe take down Derek Carr just a notch because he was up there pretty high on this guy's list. And of course, I want to pump up Kirk Cousins because he was a lot lower on the list than I thought was fair. But there's a whole lot of other notes here, and I put together a fairly detailed assessment trying to compare Andy Dalton to all of the quarterbacks in the league during the prime of his career. I came up with actually 32 total quarterbacks, and I had to qualify them all that they had to play at least 4 seasons within that time span to try and give us as accurate of a reflection as possible. And James, you know that we got to do it that way because if you went back 15 years, teams were running the ball a lot more. And if you focus just on this year, teams are passing the ball way the heck more. And so I had to try to timestamp it as best as I could for that prime part of his career. And so if all that seems to make sense to you, why don't I pull up my notes here and give you my 2 cents and we can kick this thing back and forth a little bit.
We probably should go into a little bit of, for those that don't know, what exactly the Andy Dalton Scale is.
Yeah, kick it off. Let's start there.
So it was created by Chris Wesseling a number of years ago, and he basically said Andy Dalton is the average quarterback in the NFL. If you're better than Andy Dalton or you're higher than Andy Dalton on the scale, then you're a franchise quarterback. If you're lower than Andy Dalton on the scale, your team should be looking for a replacement. And he used Andy Dalton because based on his like career statistics, you would think he was a good player, but he never really amounted to anything.
Yeah, it's like he was too good to cut loose, but not good enough to get him to win some playoff games. And so he was like always a disappointment but it was hard to pull the plug on him because quarterbacks are at a premium, and it's hard to find good quarterbacks. And it was almost a little bit of like a Jay Cutler-ish type syndrome where there was enough that you liked about him that you just wanted to hang on to him, but there was enough that you didn't like about him that it just, yeah. And you would just ask, is my quarterback better than Andy Dalton? If the answer is yes, you keep him. If the answer is no, you're back looking for a quarterback.
Exactly, and it apparently and then the article you had found was proposing, since Andy Dalton's no longer a starter, was coming up with the new quarterback that is basically the average quarterback, where the dividing line between franchise quarterback and needs to be replaced.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for tonight, let's talk about the assessment that I did and sort of compare it to Dan Hanzus's article in terms of who's really above him and who's really below him. Who are the names that are really on that list? Because, like, for example, I didn't put in guys like Josh Allen or Kyler Murray or even Justin Herbert because they're too new. They kind of hit their stride after Dalton already really fell off the map, to be honest. And so they're not even in my assessment. And then there's guys that were from like earlier in his career, like Brandon Weeden and RG3, and guys that people know, they remember the names, but they really had no staying power in the league. And so hard enough to get a big enough sample size to look at them, but it's very obvious Dalton was better than them because he had staying power. And so James, I came up with 32 total quarterbacks, including Andy Dalton, which is really just coincidental, that 32 number, with there being 32 teams. But I started with looking at guys back in 2012, and then I started tailing things off in 2019. And really, Dalton's prime career was like 2012 to 2017. He got hurt in 2017, and if you look at from that point on, you can very clearly see he never got back to form. But he had a very good 6-year sample size, which is where everybody knows him from the Andy Dalton scale. And so, we haven't done this before, but I want to see if I can share my screen here, James.
We did do it before, and it was all fucked up. It became a 3.
Oh, gotcha. All right. Well, then I'm glad you said that. I don't want to do that. Let me take this down, and I'll read it off here. And so out of these 32 names, James, I looked at a lot of stats, and it was mostly passing stats. And so guys like Cam Newton were lower on the list than what their real value is, because a lot of what he did was on the ground. And then also, it doesn't look at things like supporting cast. So if your team had a good running back or good receivers or even a great defense and helped you get wins, losses, that's a part of the equation that's missing here. This is like purely passing stats. And what I tried to do was look at what your players' touchdown percentage was, what their touchdown to interception ratio was, and then put them all on an apples to apples comparison, meaning if they all threw the exact same amount of attempts, who would have more yards, touchdowns, and interceptions than whoever else? And based off of that, assign a pecking order. And so, to me, the touchdown percent is huge, because if I let you throw the ball 20 times, I want to know how many of those 20 times are you going to score? How dangerous are you? The touchdown to interception ratio is important, because if you throw 10 touchdowns, that's great. But if you throw 10 interceptions, you basically just, voided yourself out. And guys like Jameis Winston, like, give him credit. When you look at this exercise, he actually has a very high touchdown percentage. The problem is he's also got a freaking crazy high interception percentage. And so it knocks him down on the list. And so I know that different people look at different things. These are just the 2 items that I think are the most important. and then I weighted them, and I basically put everybody into an order here. And so at the top of the list, James, no surprise, we got Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. And Mahomes kind of just like barely made the cut because he's still fairly new too. But it was enough that I felt it was important to put him in here. These guys, man, they're way up high. Both of them were over 6% with their touchdown percentage. And so that means 6% of the time they throw the ball, it's a touchdown. That's pretty huge. But also for them, extremely low interception percentage. Mahomes at 1.56, Rodgers at 1.3, and then the touchdown to interception ratio, which I mentioned is a key thing I look at. Rodgers is lighting the world on fire with 4.87. So he throws 4.87 touchdowns for every interception he throws. Mahomes, 4.19, still pretty damn respectable. When you look at all the other players across the league, they are in the 3.5 or lower category there, which just shows you these two guys, they're in a league of their own, James. And then if I take it down a little bit, I'm not going to read everybody because this will take all night, but Russell Wilson, very solidly at number 3, 6.13% touchdown percentage and a 3.45 touchdown to interception ratio. Pretty badass. Brady was at 4, no surprise there. Deshaun Watson at 5. I think that's one. Jesus left him off his list for whatever reason. And Watson at 5 was impressive because he does a lot on the ground too. And so that one, it's like, okay, if he can keep that career trajectory and actually get on the field, he's one to watch. Andrew Luck was at 6. The interesting one where I want to talk about the Jesus article is Kirk Cousins came in at 7, James. And here's the thing, like all this puts everybody apples to apples. And so Cousins has a really high completion percentage. He has a very respectable yards per attempt. But the key here is focusing on the touchdown percentage and the touchdown to interception ratio. Cousins is up there, man. He has a 5.37 touchdown percentage and a very low 1.89 interception percentage, which means he's very safe with the ball. And so just pausing for a second, I took all this and I averaged out the amount of attempts that these guys make across the group. And then I showed if everybody had that same average, what would their yards, touchdowns, and interceptions be? For Cousins, it was 4,500 yards, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I mean, that's a solid season for anybody. I think he gets dinged a little bit because they're in more of a run-first team, at least under Zimmer. But when you let him throw the ball, he is a very, very good quarterback. And then also, taking him up, but also recognizing one that needed to be maybe dropped down a notch, James, is Drew Brees. He's very solidly in this Andy Dalton era. Brees, for all the records, all the stats, all the everything he gets, he actually came in at 8th, which is one below Cousins. And that's in large part because Brees had a significantly higher interception percentage. And thinking back, it actually took me a little bit to realize, yeah, he threw a lot of touchdowns, but the dude also had a lot of turnovers, man. And so that was.
I think
Yeah.
with Brees, like a lot of the turnovers happened later in his career than it did in the beginning. Like when he basically couldn't throw the ball downfield, like I guess not. Never mind. I seem to remember it being later in his career, all his interceptions, but it looks like basically the last 4 years he had 23 interceptions over 4 years. That's pretty damn good compared to his first, whatever was that, 15, 16 years. He had 220. Okay. I remember differently. It felt like his last like 2 years he was throwing interception after interception, but guess I was wrong.
Okay. Hey, no biggie, no biggie. Yeah, and so then, looking at some of these other names, one of them that I think would surprise you, James, and I think that this one, it's just one to monitor. But Carson Wentz rated really high. He came in at number 9, and that's in large part it's a combination. He's got a high touchdown percentage. He's also got a low interception percentage, and so he fell apart that last year in Philly, but he did come back and actually put up some pretty respectable stats last year in Indianapolis. If he can, I guess, get more consistency, I think people would actually trust him as being a top tier quarterback because his career stats actually support him being in the top 10 right now.
Yeah, and if you think about his, just let's go with last year. Like for for the beginning part of the season, if you break it down game by game, he was having a pretty good year up until like the last 2 3 weeks of the season when the
Yep.
wheels fell off. And I think he just, the problem with him is, yeah, I think he's a good quarterback. I just think he buckles under the pressure and he can't handle that pressure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So this is looking just purely at like a 17 game season of stats if everybody threw the same amount of attempts. The clutch aspect is a very important thing to point out, James. And so there's definitely more to it than just this analysis. And also worth pointing out is that his yards per attempt is actually significantly lower than all of his peers. And so if you put him into this model, he only throws just over 4,000 yards in a 17 game span, whereas everybody below him and above him is around 4,400 or higher, give or take. And so that's notable because if you put a little bit more weight on that, it would bring his rating down uh, more than likely outside of the top 10. So,
True.
and then, I did want to touch on one here, which I think is important to point out, which is Matt Stafford, and it's just chilling out on his rating a little bit. Stafford came in at 13th overall, and I know he just won the Super Bowl. Everybody's super high on the guy, but and I've been saying it for years, James. His stats are so high because all they ever do is pass the ball. His whole career with the Lions, they never ran the ball, probably because they couldn't. But he always led the league or was near the top in attempts. Him and Breeze for years. And I always felt like that skewed his numbers and people thought he was better than he was. I think Stafford's a very good quarterback, but according to this assessment, he comes at number 13 overall, which is still not horrible, but Andy Dalton himself is at 16. And so I just don't want to go too crazy about Stafford when, he, when he's that close in this assessment to Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Stafford's a Hall of Famer. I think it's the stats. You're right. It is a product of the systems he played in because the Lions couldn't run the ball or didn't even try to run the ball.
Yeah.
But if you look at some of the best seasons and at the wide receiver position, like a couple of those seasons are with Stafford, and that's more of the intangible side, which just doesn't take into effect. And it, when you talked about the Lions couldn't run the ball, I heard something funny on the radio earlier today where they were talking about how Rick Pitino has to go into every fan base and give them a pep talk and say, like go into the Giants fan base and say, LT's not walking through that door because every fan base lives in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it's good to point out. And it's also good to do these exercises because you're trying to quantify some of the things that people have qualified just based off of their eye, not necessarily like some tangible stuff to support it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And then, interesting here in this assessment, Hanzus calls for Matt Ryan potentially being the 2022 Prime Meridian. If we looked at Matt Ryan's stats, he actually comes in at 15, which is one spot ahead of Andy Dalton. And so that's a very logical Prime Meridian candidate for this year. But my concern with it is that this is looking at the Dalton era. James, you and I think if we looked at the current era with all the guys that I kept out of this, Tua, Herbert, Kyler Murray, all those guys, Matt Ryan might be too far down the list to really consider as the Prime Meridian. And so, but we'll get to that later. The one thing I did want to say, though, is in this top 16, I do not see Derek Carr. And Hanzus, very clearly calls out Derek Carr as like a no-brainer better than Dalton. He may be now that he has Devontae Adams. But if you look at his stats to date, he actually comes in at number 18 on the list, which is 2 below Dalton. Not horrible, but it's, the one thing I want to point out with him is if you compared this apples to apples between Dalton and Carr, Dalton would have 4,200 yards passing. Carr would have 4,200 yards passing. Dalton would have almost 29 touchdowns. Carr 26. Dalton 15 and a half picks. Carr 11. And so Carr a little more efficient. It's kind of like pick your poison. They're pretty close, but I wouldn't say he's definitively above Andy Dalton. Maybe if you weight these things a little bit differently, yeah, you can flip the scales and get him above Dalton. I just don't think it's a no-brainer, James.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of flaws with the people he eliminated. I don't know how he fucking came up with some of these people. Like for instance, people that are clearly below Andy Dalton, like Jared Goff. Jared Goff's barely below Andy Dalton on there. Yeah, he is, but he's barely below.
Yep.
Or Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, he's a little bit below, but if you actually at one point last year, Baker Mayfield was basically on par with Andy Dalton.
Oh yeah.
I told you, was telling you earlier, through 1,818 attempts, comparing that to the NFL per 1,818 attempts, everything was like right on par with the rest of the NFL average. And I mean, 4.7 TD percentage, 2.6, a little bit higher interception percentage, but he would have been right on par with them. It's a little bit lower now, but he was right on par. And let me see who else. Carson Wentz. He's clearly below Andy Dalton. We have Carson based on the analysis that you did. It's Carson Wentz is at 9, clearly
way higher,
above,
way higher. Yeah, no, that's one that we're way off on. And it, I guess I would like to know, where does Hanzus put his priority when looking at these passers? What does he weigh the most in his evaluation? Because I'm looking at touchdowns, and touchdowns to interceptions is a ratio. If you put most of your weight on those, how much they score and how often they turn the ball over, I mean, Carson Wentz clearly has a way higher ceiling here than Andy Dalton and Derek Carr.
Exactly.
But interesting your information on Baker Mayfield. I like Baker Mayfield, and I hope it works out in Carolina. And he's still fairly young, and so things can get better for him. I think it'll help having a change of scenery. That seems to be kind of the trick for some guys in their careers, and we know that Matt Rule and company, they're kind of in do or die mode, so they're going to want to get him up to speed quickly and squeeze all the juice they can out of him as soon as possible. But so now, James, looking at this bottom 16, the guys below Andy Dalton, there were a few names that I wanted to point out. Some of them you might think are no-brainers, but they were just a little bit of a surprise to me. And one of them was Eli Manning. And so, James, he came in at 25th overall on this list, which I guess I would have thought he would have been higher because it just seemed like every year he was at least pumping out 4,000 yards a year and had some touchdowns. But when you actually go through and scrub the stats, the dude had the third worst touchdown to interception
Mhm.
ratio. I mean, he was a freaking turnover machine. And that's one where I admit my own bias is that, I remember, oh, hey, he came in when it counted and he beat the Patriots twice. And so I was always rooting for Eli Manning. But statistically speaking, he was near the bottom of the barrel for
Yeah,
starting
and
quarterbacks.
I'm not surprised by as much as you are by Eli Manning because I clearly remember, and this is probably a product of I had him a couple years on my fantasy teams where it's just like, oh my gosh, is he going to throw
Yeah.
a billion interceptions this year? Every time I turned around, he was throwing an interception. And also, if you look at overall, like Eli Manning, and this is why I don't think Eli Manning is necessarily a Hall of Fame QB, but he will get into the Hall of Fame. He's, if I remember correctly, his overall, and yeah, this takes into account the fact that he had, other players affect this because he's not playing defense and stuff, but he's 1 or 2 games below 500
Oh,
as
yeah.
overall in his career, and he just had
Two
those
magical runs, man.
2 magical playoff runs where he played his ass off.
Yeah, I think it's like because it's two, he's going to get the boost. If it
Mhm.
was just the one, maybe that would hold him back a little bit. But I don't know. It's if he's got the two and he's got the name, and that Manning name carries weight. And so, yeah. But I mean, you look at this, it's like in the Jay Cutler era. I mean, man, he was 25th out of 32 eligible quarterbacks. That's not Hall of Fame, except he had that, lightning strike twice kind of luck.
And I apologize. In the regular season, he's 117 and 117.
Dead even.
That even. I thought he dropped a game or two below 500, but I was wrong. I mean, you add in the playoffs. In the playoffs, he's 8-4.
Gotcha. Yeah, so,
All 8 wins are those 2 Super Bowl wins. Every other time he was in the playoffs, besides that streak he went on in '07/08 and 11/12, he went on a hot streak and won 4 games each of those years. Every other year, he lost in the playoffs. 2005, 2006, 2008, 2016.
yeah.
He didn't win a single game those seasons. So either he won all his games in the playoffs or he just lost in the
Oh,
playoffs.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, hot or cold. Yeah, it was a wild ride for him, man. But it made for some exciting Super Bowls, I'll tell you that.
Mm. It just clicked in my head. I forgot to bring it up when we talked about the Baker Mayfield trade.
Yeah.
It occurred to me when this trade happened, and I am correct. Do you know who Carolina plays week 1 this year?
Is it Cleveland?
It's Cleveland.
Oh my gosh. All right. The league's loving that.
Yeah. It just clicked in my head. When something else caused it to click, but it clicked that I had thought I
Yeah.
remembered that correctly. I thought I had heard it, and then
Can he get
I was
revenge right away?
exactly.
I mean, maybe
And
if they don't have a quarterback.
very true. If they don't have a quarterback, it's quite possible he can get revenge right away. Do I think he will? No.
I mean, I tell you, James, I actually really like the Carolina roster in terms of
Mhm.
like overall depth and strength, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Like they could be good. They could, I don't know if they're playoff team, but Baker, he could give them a good boost, man, because Darnold was just like dragging him down hard, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this does move the needle a little. That does move the needle a little bit on them, but um, a little bit,
All
not
right.
much.
Okay, well, let me hit a couple other names on this
Sorry,
list, and then we'll.
sorry for the
No,
tangent. It just
no, hey, no, I want you to throw them all in there, man. I don't know how long this show will go tonight, so tangents are the more the merrier. But the next guy I had on the list here, James, was Jay Cutler. I mean, like everybody and their mom knows Jay Cutler. He's got tons of hype, good and bad, over the years. He came in at 26, one spot lower than Eli. I think I was expecting him to maybe be a little bit higher too. Uh, but, truth be told, he's a guy that was kind of like a perennial underperformer, if that makes sense, where it's like people always thought he was a franchise quarterback, but he never like lit the world on fire despite having this like crazy strong arm. And when you look at the stats, I mean, it shows pretty clearly that he had a high interception percentage, brought him down into the abyss of these franchise signal callers. But he did have a long career: Denver, Chicago, Miami. I think these guys just kept giving him chances because they fell in love with that arm strength and thought that maybe they could get him to click. Oh, well, with my quarterback coach or with this, he'll be that guy. He never really was that guy. He just had a strong arm, and he was good enough to kind of like stay on the starting roster, but that's about it.
Yeah. So I, whenever I hear Jay Cutler, the only thing I can think of is that meme that went around a couple of years ago when his wife, or his now ex-wife, she had had a kid, or ex-girl or whatever, his baby mama. She had a kid, and the chick with the reality show.
Oh, yeah,
Apparently,
yeah.
she had a clogged milk tube in her breast, and so one of her friends on the reality show asked her how she got it out, and she replied, "Jay sucked harder than he sucked in his life." And the meme was, "Did you see him play football?"
Oh, I don't even know what to say about that one.
Yeah, but that's what pops in my head when you say Jay Cutler. Jay
Yeah,
Cutler, Jay Cutler was all hype,
yeah,
nothing. I mean, shit. When he got to Chicago, his first year, he had what, 30 interceptions? 26. Sorry, 26 interceptions the first year in Chicago,
yeah,
and it didn't get better.
yeah. He was
For
a turnover machine, man. Yeah,
yeah, he averaged what's this average? And this is counting what he played, 5 games, 2 years. Didn't even play full seasons, and he had 13 interceptions per season. And he didn't even play all the games. He averaged, let's see, games per year. He averaged a little bit shy of 13 games per year. So he had an interception per game, basically.
Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Uh, all right. Well, here, let me give you my opposite Jay Cutler, but still ranked near the bottom, and that's Alex Smith. We've talked a lot about how that guy was really smart with the football, really good game manager, um, but he deserved. I mean, I would say he's one of these guys that, despite being this low on this list, he deserves more credit. And so he came in at 24. Um, we've talked a lot about it. If you're a team that has a good defense and a running game, you can make the case for him doing your team right because he's going to be smart with the football and he's going to let your better attributes help win you the game. He's not going to be the guy that is going to win a shootout for you, but he did throw 2 times as many touchdowns as interceptions, which is solid. It's just the thing that drug him down is his touchdown percent was low, 3.94%. He didn't even make that 4% mark, significantly lower than pretty much any of his peers. And I mean, most of the guys above Dalton are close to 5 or higher. With him being under 4, that's really what drug him down in these ratings, is just that as a passer, there's something to be desired there. And, I hate knocking Alex Smith because I think he was a really good quarterback, uh, just not in that great category.
So I'm gonna have to look these teams up, or that team up, because if you look at the stats for Alex Smith, he had in his career he had 109 interceptions, and 53 of them were his first 5 seasons.
Well, that's actually that would that'd be a good evaluation for him to show the career arc getting better as his time went on. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, you're right. I'm looking at it right now. He had 53 interceptions in his first 6 years because I took out his rookie season. And
no,
then,
so
wow, he was like ultra efficient after that. 5, 5, 7, 6, 7, 8, 5, 5, 8. Yeah, but it's also sometimes the touchdowns aren't there. So like the year he had 8, he only had 15 touchdowns, but still, it's good. I like that you did that. You gave him the assist to show he very clearly got better in the back half of his career.
yeah, and I'm trying to recall those 49ers teams were
They made the
uh
playoffs. He went to the NFC Championship the one year.
yeah, but that was later, I thought.
It was his final year in San Francisco.
Right, but if you look at the list, his final year was 2012.
Oh,
He
no,
had
no,
five.
it had to be 11 because Kaepernick took over in 12.
Yeah, blah blah blah. Beat the Saints. NFC Championship game in 2011 season, where he had 5 interceptions. Before that,
17 touchdowns that year. That was good.
yeah, before that, like in 2010, he had
14 and 10. It wasn't good.
yeah. I'm looking for who the coach was that year.
Oh, was that the Mike Nolan era? Is that what you're thinking?
No,
Or the
Nolan was
linebacker? What was
no,
his
no. It
name?
was Singletary was 9, and I don't remember if how long Singletary was coach there. So Singletary was head coach for the 49ers 2009 and 2010.
Okay,
And then before that was the
Mike Nolan.
Mike Nolan era. So that could account for how why he had so many interceptions his first 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. It. Hey, I mean, I like that he turned it around, and I liked him a lot in the back half of his career. He was one of those guys you were always rooting for him, underdog kind of guy. He wasn't gonna lights out 350 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. But man, he just was like super efficient. And, one of the things that isn't pointed out here is that he actually did get some stuff done on the ground. He did run when he needed to, and that gave him a boost where his arm didn't always. So, uh, all right. So, James, the last one, this one you might have a couple things to say about, but I wanted to talk about Joe Flacco. And so Flacco is 31 out of 32 on this list. And I know that you've not always been a big fan of Joe Flacco. I liked him, um, but I tell you, wow, the stats, they're ugly.
Mhm.
And so um, I would have at least thought he would have been higher than guys like Bradford, Bortles, and Fitzpatrick. But no. And I would have at least thought his yards per attempt would have been higher, but no. For a guy who was known as having like just a freaking cannon of an arm, he threw 6.74 yards per attempt, which is like very, very clearly in the bottom rung of these quarterbacks. And so I don't know what the heck that was all about, but holy cow. And then, he just didn't get it done, man. I mean, if you projected him out, we're showing 3,900 yards, 22 touchdowns to 13 and a half interceptions. That's not great, man. But yeah, just throwing that out there, James.
Yeah, and that's a little skewed from his last year with the Jets, because I mean he played in 2 games and threw 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Joe Flacco, what to say about Joe Flacco? If you look at even the year he won, it was
Even the
respectable. It
Super
was
Bowl year, he got
Super
hot in
Bowl
the
year.
playoffs, man.
He got hot in the playoffs, but it was respectable, um, for that year. I mean, it was 2.2 to 1 touchdown interception ratio, but in the playoffs that year, he threw 11 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Yeah, it was impressive.
And I think he was more of a product of the system because I mean, it was the defense, and all you needed at quarterback was just a game manager.
Yeah, great defense, great running games. I mean, they would have loved to have a guy like Alex Smith all day on that team.
Yeah, and also if you look at that's how San Francisco won both their Super Bowls. They are not San Francisco. Baltimore won both their Super Bowls. I just got confused. The
Oh, the
Harbaughs in
Trent
my mind.
Dilfer
And
year going
the
back?
Trent Dilfer year going back. If you look at that, all you needed was a game manager. But yeah, Trent Dilfer went out and won the fucking Super Bowl for Baltimore, and the next year they go out and trade for Elvis Grbac, who played what, like a year.
Yeah, it was weird, but I mean, it was also, I mean, they won with like the least likely quarterback ever.
See, I would actually push back on that because from what I remember for Trent Dilfer, huh? Different era?
Well,
I don't
that for
remember.
sure different era, yeah.
No, no, like I don't remember. I didn't remember the stats for the 2000 season. Like I kind of remember him as the like 90, 97, 98 seasons. That's what I remember when I think of Trent Dilfer before he
Okay.
was when he had 97, 98. He had 21 touchdowns each year and 11 or 15 interceptions. So almost 2 to 1 and almost 1.5 to 1 um, each year. But I mean, wow. Holy shit, that's not a lot of yards.
No, that was all run first era, man. Like
Yeah,
there were only a handful of teams that were airing it out back then.
yeah, but all Dilfer did, Dilfer was 130 and 130. I'm sorry, that's not his record. That's his. Why do they not have his record on here? Huh.
Hmm, I don't know.
Anyways,
But yeah, it's so let me, I guess, sum it up on my Dalton era assessment. And so I came in, James, with him at 16 out of 32 eligible quarterbacks, which I think solidly supports that he was the prime meridian quarterback of his era. But I do want to say that he is way better than that kind of terminology gives him credit for, because that's 32 what were considered quote unquote franchise quarterbacks. That's not a snapshot of one season looking at 32 quarterbacks, because if you looked season by season, there's all sorts of guys like frickin' Teddy Bridgewater, frickin' Brock Osweiler, Matt Castle, Christian Ponder, all sorts of guys that just like churned at the bottom of that quarterback, group. And this is 32 guys that had staying power. For him to be at 16, I think that speaks volumes that he was actually a pretty darn good quarterback, man.
yeah, I always liked Andy Dalton. Like the later years, not so much.
Yeah,
Um,
he did
but
fall off the map, man.
yeah, he kind of fell off the map. I think when he kind of took the backup role, and then fucking Chicago tweeted out QB1 with a picture for him of him, just like
Yeah.
Washington did with Carson Wentz recently. So, but yeah, pretty solidly, his numbers are as pretty damn good to end up right in the middle. Even if you were to move him to this era, and he still ends up right in the middle.
Yeah, no, I think pretty good. Now, I guess looking at the new era, like this year, 2022, I think I sent you my just sort of off the cuff rankings of how I would put this together. Because if I'm trying to find the new Andy Dalton, I'm looking at the passers going into this season, and I'm just asking myself, do I think this guy's better than that guy? What kind of stats do I have to support it? There's still a lot of guys that are young in their careers that are hard to assess. Jalen Hurts is one of those guys. Tua Tagovailoa, however you say his name, he's one of those guys. Uh,
Tagovailoa.
Thank you. And then you have guys that maybe there's enough there. Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, even Justin Herbert, pretty young, Joe Burrow. Josh Allen, you could probably say there's enough there for him now. But these are guys that have gotten better. You gotta, like, when you're looking at these, you almost always got to take out the rookie year, because for almost all of these guys, the rookie year is horrible. And when you take that out, there's really not a whole lot of sample size for them, and so it's hard to grade them. But I did my best to kind of put together my rankings here in trying to figure out who I would consider to be the new Andy Dalton. Matt Ryan, if I'm looking at my list, I got him at 18. And so, that's close to 16. But, I think that the new Andy Dalton scale, James, should be your 14th ranked quarterback if I was going to do it my way. And my logic for that is that only 14 quarterbacks are getting in the playoffs. If you're not one of them, you're below that prime meridian. And so if I was at 14, just the way that I put this together, and I don't know, you might think I'm crazy, but I got two, I got two at 14. I think you could drop him lower and put guys like maybe Derek Carr for this year above him with Devontae Adams coming to town. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, like, I got guys in this range. Maybe Wentz is now that new, prime meridian candidate. And some of this is when you compare the Dalton era to the current era, you're adding in all these guys like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, very clearly in the top half. And so it's pushing guys like Carson Wentz lower than where he ranked in that Dalton era, which makes me feel like that's more fitting maybe for him to be a prime meridian candidate. But, what are you thinking, man? What's your thoughts on that?
So are we talking? I just want clarification on this. We're
Yeah,
talking for this season
I'm saying, like,
or
basically
going
this
forward.
season going forward, like in the next however many years, not the next 10 years, but the next couple years.
So, so there's a couple things with your analysis because if it was just this season, you have to take out Deshaun Watson because I fully believe Watson's going to be suspended for the entire season.
Yeah, it's a wild card. Yep.
If you're talking this season going forward, you have to take out Tom Brady because
He'll
this is Tom
probably be
Brady's last
retired.
year.
Yep.
So when you kind of adjust for that, and then you look at it, um, so you take hypothetically based on your rankings. I disagree in here, and I'll get to that in a second.
Well, I
Based on your
want you to do
rankings,
your own here, James.
oh no, based on your rankings, you're considering those factors. Either one, either taking Deshaun Watson or Tom Brady, one or the other,
Yeah.
because both. Then you're looking more at Jalen Hurts.
So yeah, that puts Hertz up to
Uh,
13.
No, put Hurts at 14 because
Oh,
you're only
because you
taking
add
one of
back,
them.
yeah, you add back Watson if you're looking at the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that puts Hertz at 14. I like that. I could see him being that pivot point.
So now finagling your rankings, I think you have Stafford a little bit low. I would put him above Cousins. I would drop Murray down, but I think you have to be in the top 10
And
to
then
have
anybody outside the
legitimate
top 10
shot,
is yeah. Okay.
have a legitimate shot at winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
So,
so you're thinking hey, it's not about being a franchise quarterback. It's about being a franchise quarterback that can win you playoff games.
yes, because you play to win the
Yeah.
game.
No, that's a very
to
good point.
play for a championship.
Yeah,
So,
because the other thing I was going to say is that when you look at this new era of passers, because teams are more pass centric, there's actually a lot more names on here that are very respectable starters.
mhm.
But that's the key, James, like you're talking about. It's who's going to win you some playoff games. And if it's not, is my guy better than him or worse than him? It's, is this guy good enough to win a playoff game? If he's not, then he's not good enough.
Yeah, it's not so much is this guy good enough to win a playoff game? Is this can I trust him to come through in that moment and win the Super Bowl for me?
Well, yeah, I mean, now you're making it even smaller list.
Yeah, but I think if I because I understand the playoff and winning a playoff game, but winning a playoff game doesn't do shit.
All right, so if you're not Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, or Tom Brady, you fall below the prime meridian.
All right, so on your list, I think very clearly the top eight on your list, and I'm including Tom Brady in this for these
Yeah,
purposes.
just for keep it
Very
simple. I got you.
clearly, the top eight are good enough to win the Super Bowl.
I
I
agree with that. Yeah.
while I like Kirk Cousins, I don't think he's good enough to win the Super Bowl.
No, and the
You
thing with
need
Cousins, which was the big thing I wanted to point out, and it kind of goes back to the comparison to Dalton. If you compared, I know I compared Dalton to Stafford. They were 13 and 16. If you compare Stafford to Cousins and you said, okay, we're going to even this out and we're just going to extrapolate Cousins' stats as if him and Stafford threw the same amount of passes, Cousins actually comes out way better, man. We're talking 4,500 yards compared to 4,300. We're talking 31 touchdowns and change to 28, and we're talking 11 interceptions to almost 13. He's a more efficient passer. He just doesn't pass at that high of a volume. But I think it also comes back to what you're talking about, which is hard to build into the model, which is that clutch factor. Okay,
Mhm.
if the game is on the line or it's a big game, like because Cousins has been knocked for not winning primetime games, you know, how do you put that in there and put some weight on that? In which case, you're saying it elevates Stafford and it drags Cousins down.
Mhm. And so if I were to refinagle your top 10, I'm just going to go to the top 10
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm not going to refinagle the entire thing. I agree Patrick Mahomes won. Uh, I would put Aaron Rodgers over Josh Allen. I'd leave Wilson there. I'd put Herbert above Brady. I'd also put Burrow above Brady. Then Brady at 7, Watson at 8, Stafford at 9, Cousins at 10.
gotcha.
And I think Cousins, as bad as it's saying, with Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Dak
Yep.
Prescott, who are who are appear to be franchise quarterbacks, but I think those three, I think those four, Cousins, Murray, Jackson, Prescott, they fit that Andy Dalton characteristic. He's good enough that you don't want to get rid of him, but not good enough to win the big game.
Yeah, can he get you there? I
So
gotcha.
I would be comfortable putting any of those four as the prime meridian.
I gotcha. Yeah, so it's after Watson, is what you're
Yeah.
saying. Okay.
Uh, After Stafford.
After Stafford, sorry. After
So
Stafford.
I
Okay.
have Stafford just above Cousins.
Yeah.
So
So Stafford makes the cut. Everybody else is a question mark.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
whichever one of those four, Cousins, Murray, Jackson, Prescott, you want to put in as the prime meridian, you want to err on the side. I might reorganize, put Jackson above Murray and Prescott above Murray. But I mean, any one of those four I could see as being the prime meridian.
Gotcha. I like that input. All right, so I guess looking at the list for now, any other takeaways that you want to hit on, or is it? I mean, this is all just, we're kind of off the cuff here, making guesses on rankings. Well, no, we didn't want to go past the top 10.
Yeah.
Let's switch this over, James, and let's do our question of the week. I did enjoy the Andy Dalton scale, but so I want to go back to the Baker Mayfield news with him going to Carolina. What does that mean now for Jimmy G? Because I tell you what, James, he is running out of places to land. And I just skimmed the list real quick, and I'll just give you the list of teams and like the wild ass reasons why maybe. You got Seattle, which seems like they're probably the most in need, but unlikely because they're in the same division. There's Atlanta, which you could say, okay, Jimmy G should be solidly better than Mariota, but would they give up on him before it even starts? Especially with a rookie passer behind him. Cleveland maybe is an intriguing spot because if they've got Watson on such a low cap number for this year, like you pointed out, maybe they take Jimmy G to keep him afloat so that they know they can get into the playoffs. But it'd be a 1 year deal. Houston, you could make the argument Jimmy G is better than Davis Mills, but they're pumping out a lot of talk about Lovie Smith likes Davis Mills and wants to give him a chance. Then there's the Giants, which, I mean, let's just be real. Daniel Jones isn't the answer. Would they make a move for Jimmy G? I don't know if that's possible because Daniel Jones is in that 5th year option. They owe him a lot of money. If you keep going, you got maybe Miami because of the connection with Mike McDaniel, but that would mean they're giving up on Tua and saying he's a bust, which I think that's premature. And then the last team that I could even possibly fathom, which I still don't even think is a feasible option, is Tampa Bay because maybe this is Brady's last year and you want to get your next guy now while he's available, but I don't see that happening. No way in heck, man. Brady and Garoppolo on the same squad again. That just, I don't know. I'm at awe. I don't know where I could even place Jimmy Garoppolo now. I mean, what do you think, man?
So this is right in my wheelhouse because I thought about this and I've thought about this, and situation and facts are a little different because when Brady retired, I started pounding the drum that Jimmy G was going to end up in Tampa Bay. Pounding the drum, Jimmy G's going to end up in Tampa Bay. Just keep pounding that drum. Guess where he's going to end up?
You think
Tampa Bay.
For a trade, or he rides it out with the 49ers and he goes there in free agency?
Oh, no. There's no way in hell he's going to be on the roster week 1 for the 49ers. No way in hell. If he's on the roster week 1 for the 49ers, Trey Lance is a bust.
Oh, man.
He's a bust. He's not ready, and Jimmy G will be starting week 1. You need to snip that shit off. You need to cut it off at the balls because that entire locker room will run through a fucking wall for Jimmy G.
I mean, then what do you think? What was it? Brian Dable went to the Giants, get Jimmy G, just get rid of Daniel Jones, and get your quarterback and start making it work.
See, I would say that, and you could say that, but I've been seeing a lot of stuff of how Dable likes Daniel Jones.
Oh man. But does he really, or is he just saying it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, where else could you go?
I'm also curious if the Giants don't want to win this year.
Because they want to draft a quarterback.
Because there's a couple good candidates coming out in the next draft.
I mean, that's a good strategy, and they're a young enough head coach in terms of his tenure that you're going to let him suck this year without penalty, really, and you could if you draft a quarterback, you can kind of let him suck again next year without penalty. It's then his third year that they got to start performing. I could see that being a good strategy.
Yeah,
I guess to me, it's like if you want to just start getting it going, just go after Jimmy G now. I don't know where else he could land, man.
did you not listen to me? Tampa Bay.
But before the season, I don't know, dude. You think Brady's going to let him be on that roster? Well, maybe
Yeah,
because he'll be the backup.
he'll be
He's
the
like, yeah, you
clear.
can come and back me up.
Yeah, he'll be the clear backup. There won't be um, any question about who the starter is. I was looking for the list of there we go, Giants head coaches because it's. I think that Daboll's going to get a few years
Okay.
because the last.
Well, I mean, I was just telling you, he's going to get at least three if they tank, draft a quarterback. He's going to get three right there in that system.
McAdoo, Shermer, and Judge only got 2 years each.
Yeah, but
And
they
I
were
remember,
all just freaking horrible.
right. So I think the Maras are going to give Dayball a little bit longer of a leash as long as they see improvement.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, Joe Judge was 10-23. Shermer was 9-23. And McAdoo was the best out of all of them at 13-15.
Man, they all sucked. They
Yeah.
all sucked. Especially McAdoo, man. I really didn't like him. I just didn't like watching him talk. He just
Oh.
rubbed me the wrong way.
Which isn't, yeah, he is. Which the most fucked up thing in the world is he's now
Offensive
the
coordinator.
offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers.
Good luck, Baker. Good luck. But hang on. I'll say this. I actually thought McAdoo was a good offensive coordinator. I didn't like him when he became a head coach.
Yeah, I can give you that.
I'm not saying great offensive coordinator, just good.
I mean, they did go from 28th to 13th his first year, and then went to sixth in scoring um, his second year, and that's how he parlayed that into being the head coach. So yeah, there were a lot of strides forward there with under his 2 years he was offensive coordinator,
Yeah.
or 3 years, sorry, no, 2 years, because he was 14-15.
All right. Well, um, yeah. So I guess for anybody out there, similar to Name That Stadium, hit us up with some comments. Let us know what you think about our question of the week. Where's Jimmy G gonna end up now? Somebody give us some credible inside info. We want to know. And James, I don't know, man. What else you got for tonight? Any closing thoughts? Any final tangents? We got
Well,
time if you want to keep running on something.
I think that might be it for tonight. I
Okay.
have to come up with a topic for not next week, but the week after. But
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back and find out what we did at this time last year because some of them are good, repeatable things, but then some of them are like not, and so it might be time for something fresh like this. But yeah, hey, check it out, think about it, let me know what you think, man. And if anybody's watching, let us know what you think. If you got a topic you want us to hit up, tell us because we might do it. All right, cool. Well, hey, James, like always, man, it was fun. And yeah, for anybody listening or watching, we hope you thought it was fun and that you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that thumbs up, that like button, whatever. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, it's a big boost for me and James. We are down a subscriber. How the heck did that happen, James? And so we need to get some back. So hook us up, guys. All right, James. It's a good night, man. I'll catch you later.
all right, have a good one.
See ya.
Gridiron Grinder. Hut hut hike.